Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start things out this evening by warming you up with a little bit of poetry. I'll explain to you how I came to write this poem. A couple of months ago, late in May 20, it was Tuesday, May 26th, I had to come down to West Hollywood for a meeting with a producer who wanted to give me rewrite notes on a screenplay he had told me was perfect. Thank you for that applause. For those of you not in the entertainment industry, producers are very much like dogs. The more they like a thing, the more they need to pee on it. And this producer likes me a lot. So I had to come to West Hollywood to be figuratively peed on, which is one of the top 10 reasons that people come to West Hollywood. Sort of an irony, because literally being peed on is one of the top 3. Now, I am compulsively punctual, but I'm also neurotically status conscious. So I always arrive early, but I never want to be the first person to get there. So I found myself in West Hollywood with some time to kill, and I went into a coffee house. Men, let me just give you a small piece of advice before I go further with this. If you're ever feeling a little down on yourself, a little unappealing, a little less than perfectly attractive, dress up nicely as though you're going to meet with a producer, and go to a coffee house in West Hollywood. Oh my God. I was getting checked out like the Kama Sutra at a middle school library. And I'm not particularly homophobic, so for me, just getting my ego stroked is fine, as long as, my ego's the only thing getting stroked. And let me just take a moment to say for the record that I don't understand homophobia. It makes no sense to me. I don't really understand what there is to fear there. It's not as though there are packs of gay men roaming the countryside, filleting straight men against their will. That does not happen. The reason I knew that it was May 26th, in fact, is that it was the day that the California Supreme Court was deciding the Prop 8 issue. This is where homophobes just completely lose me. They say, oh, we can't let gays marry. We have to protect the sanctity of marriage. Okay, fine. But if you want to protect the sanctity of marriage, you don't keep some people from getting married. You outlaw divorce and unanticipated weight gain. It's like there's some bizarre group of heated homophobes hiding out somewhere, and every 10 years or so they come up with something to throw up against the wall, and sometimes it sticks, 10 years ago it was all about gays in the military. Well, we can't let gays in the military. And they knew they couldn't admit that it was about bigotry and homophobia. They knew they couldn't go on television and say, hey, we're not saying these guys can't fight. We're just saying when we think about what they do at home, it makes us go, ooh. That's never going to fly. So they have to make up the little excuses. Oh, it's going to hurt morale if we let gays in the military. No, it's not. All right, look. You find yourself in the mountains of Afghanistan under heavy fire. Don't you think the guy next to you is more likely to save your life if he's in love with you? See, I don't care what he thinks he's saving my butt for, just so long as it's getting saved. That's all I'm saying. My life is on the line. I want to be the most popular guy in the barracks. Candy and flowers for everybody. And the people who are now saying, oh, we don't want gays to marry, are the same ones who 30 years ago were saying the problem with gays is they're too promiscuous. Here's my theory. You can't please bigots. I'm just floating a theory. I don't know what I was talking about. Oh, yes. So I'm sitting in this coffee house in West Hollywood. And it is the day that the California Supreme Court is going to make its decision. And there are 2 young men sitting sort of at tables near each other. They've never met before. They're each sketching in a notepad. And they start to sort of look over each at what the other is doing. And it turns out that in this moment when it's possible that they're going to find out later in the day that they will be allowed to wed, each one is sketching out what his ideal wedding garb would be if he could find the right man. One of them is working on a tuxedo that involves a lot of lacy frills and a long train. And the other one is working on a wedding dress that involves a bow tie and a cummerbund. And they're starting to see each other's work, and they're starting to move closer and closer together. And I was reminded of this event that had occurred several years earlier. I had gone to the East Coast to see my sister speak, but I sort of did a whole family visitation trip. First I visited my grandmother. My grandmother, it was just the early stages of Alzheimer's at this point, and I visited, and every time she saw me, she thought it was my birthday and gave me $5. So that was exhausting to deal with. I had to keep walking in and out of that room. It was at that place where she still sort of has it together, but every conversation is turned into a 1970s surreal game show. I went into that place with the buildings and the smell. Manhattan? Yes! I was with that lady. My mother? No! Flowered dress, long stories. Aunt Katie? No! Bad breath, really stupid. Your best friend Sarah? Yes! And we saw that horrible man. Newt Gingrich? No! Worse, Rush Limbaugh? No! No, he used to be horrible in New York, and then he was horrible all over the country, and now he's horrible from space. Howard Stern? Yes! Congratulations, Grandma, you're going on to the dementia pyramid. Who are you people? Things you say at dinner. Where am I? Things you say in the kitchen. 1943, 1932, years you think it might be right now? Ding, ding, ding. Some people get upset. Oh, you shouldn't do jokes about that. That's tragic. It was my grandmother who taught me we are Jews. We do not believe in tragedy. We believe in horror, injustice, and atrocity. We just recognize that these are all inherently hilarious. And now my mother's all freaked out that she's going to get Alzheimer's. She said, Dylan, you have to promise me when I start to show symptoms, you will tell me so that I know when it's time to take my own life. I said, Mom, we just had this conversation 20 minutes ago. So sad to watch my grandmother's decline. Man, she used to be so sharp. I remember I was 8 years old. I went to her. I said, Grandma, I'm going to go to camp. I'm going to play guitar. I'm going to ride horses. She said, yeah, I went to a camp once. Spent 9 months of my life playing liar's poker, going pair of threes. 3 5s. Do you know how sharp you have to be to win with the same numbers every day, people? Then by the end, she was just blurting stuff out. We must never forget. What must we never forget, Grandma? You know, that thing with the boots and the ovens. Okay. Oh, too soon? So, okay. Visited all the family and wound up in New York, late October, Halloween night, to see my sister speaking at NYU. My sister was delivering a brilliant lecture at NYU. On the way in which for the last 30 years every prominent welfare reform proposal has been based on the idea that the best way to discourage people from being poor is to take away their money. And my sister takes this very personally. I should explain a little bit. My sister is gay. I love her like a brother. And she is the single mother of a beautiful daughter who was deliberately conceived in a loving act between my sister and a turkey baster that was briefly filled with mail-ordered sperm. Just one of the reasons I won't do Thanksgiving dinner at my sister's place. Mom, get that out of the butter. You don't know where it's been. We just had this conversation 20 minutes ago. And my sister was briefly on government assistance. She's not a drain on society. She's not a slacker. But she had lost her. She was fired from a bartending job for breastfeeding her infant in a back room on a break. At an establishment, mind you, that proudly displays posters of the Coors Girls. because we live in this bizarre society where it's okay to use breasts to sell beer, but not to feed children. So I was going to hear my sister speak at NYU, which put me in the East Village. And as you may or may not know, I am compulsively punctual, but I am also neurotically status conscious. So I was in the East Village on Halloween night, and I had some time to kill. And I found myself wandering around, getting a cup of coffee, and standing on a street corner, waiting for the light to change. I noticed next to me a young couple, leather couple, a young man in a leather Speedo and a dog collar, and his partner, who was wearing leather chaps and a leather vest and a leather policeman's hat. And I could tell he was the other guy's master, because he was holding his leash. And I smiled at them, and they smiled at me. And I was thinking, for the first time, I thought, you know, what a great world we live in, where if you wait long enough and you're open enough to the possibilities, anybody can find somebody to love. And we stood there waiting for the light to change. And then, because if you've never been in the East Village on Halloween night, oh man, it's just everywhere. It's men dressed up in their happiest fantasies. Men who have been out of the closet for years have found deeper, darker closets with new wardrobe to try on. So coming up perpendicular to us as we stood there was another couple dressed for the holiday, and these two were dressed as sperm. They were wearing white leotards and white tights, and they had long toilet paper tails, and they were sort of skipping and dancing up the street the other way past us. And in case we couldn't tell what they were singing "Sperm, Glorious Sperm" as they went. And they went frolicking by, and the leather boy slave turned to his leather boy master and said, "Freaks." And it was at the moment that it just suddenly in my head, I realized that we live in a wonderful world where if you wait long enough and you're open enough to the possibilities, anybody can find somebody to judge harshly. And I remembered all of this as I was sitting in the coffee house in West Hollywood, killing time before my meeting with the producer, and I saw these two young men coming closer and closer together and looking at each other's sketches. And I knew that at this moment, they were living in a time of possibility. Hours later, they might have seen each other and just walked past because, you know, what would be allowed for them? All of their dreams would have been lost in the legislative semantic of marriage. But at this moment, anything could happen. And they were making a connection, and I was watching it. And I wrote this poem with which I will begin the evening. It's called Corner of Starbucks and Christopher Street. Sharpie-marked cups play name tag. Rich, dark Colombian meets slightly bitter French. A pretentious morning blend. They come together and claim to seek no more than the hot foam and the sweet macchiato. Thank you.